Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Stacey, and on this channel I talk about stationery, planning, journaling, commonplacing, all of that fun stuff. So if you're interested in any of those things, then please feel free to subscribe. Today, as you can see from the title of the video, I want to talk about some things that I use commonplacing and journaling for in order to aid me and my mental health. So the way I'm going to work it is, because I cannot write about one thing and then talk about another at the same time. That's just impossible for me. So I am going to do some commonplacing, and then I'll do a talk over segment while I'm commonplacing to talk about the actual point of the video. If you would like to, I'd love it if you journal along or commonplace along with me. That would be great. What I will say, quickly, just want to show you I've just updated my Commonplace with some stickers. I'll link them down below. I just think they're really cute. There are a couple of different places they're from. These ones are all from the same place, and then I've got a couple of others that are from different places. Yeah, if you would like to, because I know I'll forget to say this, if you would like to add some of your some ways that you find that commonplacing or journaling aid you with your mental health, or any techniques that you use to give tips for other people, please feel free to pop them down in the comments. I really think that would be helpful. I'd love this to be a really useful resource for people to come to get some ideas and inspiration. So if you do have any of those, like I say, please feel free to pop them into the comments. And with that said, let's get into the video. Okay, so I'm going to kind of split this into two halves of journaling and commonplacing. Even though there are some overlapping themes, I do think it's important to be distinctive about them both. So, number one for journaling is that it gives me a way of expressing myself without fear of judgment, of conflict, or offense. So, using anxiety as an example, when I'm feeling anxious, I've often been told, oh, don't be silly, or just calm down, or all of those amazing things that you get told when you're anxious that are really unhelpful. And there are sometimes, especially nowadays in today's political climate, you can say something is making you anxious about a certain political event or a stance that's being taken, whatever, and that can cause conflict, it can cause offense, it can really be quite contentious. So for me, definitely amongst my family, and things like that, I just feel like it's better to write those things down rather than verbally express them to some people. And then there's no conflict, and there's nothing that I'm then worrying about is going to upset somebody, or is going to upset me further when I'm already anxious about something. And also, I think you get to know who is supportive and who comes out with, those little sound bites of just calm down, or don't worry about it, or don't be ridiculous. And so if I'm only surrounded by those people in that moment, then, it's easier just to write it down, isn't it? And that's just a way of sort of protecting my mental health for myself. Number two goes on quite nicely from that is, it's not always the right time or the right place or the right person available to speak to when you need to. So for me, I spend probably 80% of my time alone with my son. So, or not alone, but like just he's there with me all the time at the moment, and he's 12. So it's entirely inappropriate for me to express my anxieties to him, at least most of them. So I wouldn't dream of doing that where I'm just sitting there unloading on him. That's absolutely not his job. So I will write it down. also going back to what I said about certain people, they're not always the right person to express to or whatever it is. Then some people you have an acquaintanceship with, not necessarily a deep friendship where you feel that you can express certain, I don't know, feelings and things like that. So I do think that that's another way that journaling is so incredible, is that, I take a book with me, a notebook, wherever I go, so that because my brain does this really annoying thing of, at one point when I'm in that anxiety, or when I'm in a certain state of, I guess, depression, or if I'm feeling a certain way, whatever it is, I can quite easily express myself and get my point across really clearly. And then when later on, when I'm trying to explain it, it's just gone. I just physically cannot do it. So what I find quite helpful is, or sometimes it can be the opposite way around, but what I find quite helpful is that I can write down in the moment what I'm feeling, why I'm feeling it, what triggered it, whatever it was, and then I can either process that myself later if I need to. Sometimes it's just a case of it's just gone. I've done it, I've processed it, it's out of my brain. More often than not, I like to, I don't know, talk to my husband about it or whatever. So I will write it down and then I can kind of go back to that if I need to remember those points that I want to get across, and also quite often what it is that triggered it, because that's often really, really helpful to me to know what it was that triggered the thought or the feeling so that I can process it more easily, in a time that's more appropriate to myself, or I don't know, when I need more time for it, I have more time, that's when I can do it. Um, and therefore, number three, the immediacy of journaling is incredibly helpful mentally. So you can just pick up a pen and paper and write. It doesn't have to be, anything special. You can just pick up a pen and paper and write. And I think that that immediacy is crucial when you are in a certain state sometimes. When, if you are feeling a certain way, you can get those feelings out. You can, again, like I said, it will sometimes help you to just be over it and done. You've written it down and the thought's gone and it's done. Other times it can be something you can come back to process later on at a more opportune moment. But that immediacy is what is important, is that you can be in the moment or very close to that moment, um, and then still be able to have that tool there. You don't have to wait a week till you next speak to your therapist or whatever. You've got those things down. And that's the other thing, is if you are in therapy and you're seeing somebody week by week, for example, it's really, really helpful for you and the therapist to write certain things down in order to be able to remember them in that session, in the next session. So again, it's another fantastic tool for that. Number four is that it helps me to realize when I'm blowing things out of proportion. So there are, like I said, you'll always have someone telling you that you're blowing it out of proportion, especially if it's to do with anxiety. But some things you're not. So that being able to process what is and isn't something that's being blown out of proportion, and sometimes literally as I'm writing something down that happened that day that I'm upset about or whatever, as I'm writing it down, I'm thinking, oh, and it's almost like I can see it from somebody else's perspective. Like, from, say it's an example, an argument, for example. So say I've had a disagreement with my husband, and then I'm writing down furiously later on in my journal, he said this. Well, quite often I can then, it gives me that different perspective of, oh, okay, actually, that probably did come across like that, and that wasn't what you intended, or whatever it is. And so then it helps to resolve those problems. Again, protecting your mental health, perhaps solving some mental health issues if you're always feeling like you're being attacked, and it can help you reflect on why that is, and perhaps maybe not all of the problem is you, but maybe if you come at things a different way, problem solving, that kind of thing. Um, so yeah, I think it's very important to acknowledge how good journaling is for that reflective process and to understand yourself more fully. And number five is potentially contentious, but just hear me out, is that you don't have to buy anything or leave the house if you physically can't or you don't want to. So I know that I have a YouTube channel where I buy things and show you them. So I'm not necessarily talking about me in this instance. What I mean is to use journaling as a technique to help you with your mental health. Most people have a notebook and a pen in their house, or some paper and a pen in their house, even if it's the back of an envelope and a pen you stole from the bank. Um, you don't have to buy anything. Would I recommend that you get a notebook and a pen? Yes. It doesn't have to be expensive. It can literally be one of those 50p ones from the post office and a 20 pence pen, like those rubbish Bic ones. You don't have to spend a lot of money in order to do it, and it's incredibly inexpensive if you do not have a stationery addiction like me. So I think that that makes it very accessible, and it's something that, as long as you are literate, you can do it. And to be fair, as long as you understand what you're writing, I don't even think it matters how literate you are. Um, my husband will quite often say, well, I'm not very good at spelling and I'm not very good at this. Okay, that doesn't mean that as long as you can read it, it doesn't matter. So even if you come up with your own code, just write. Um, and again, sometimes for me, I physically cannot leave the house because of the disability I have. So there are days when, I am literally just stuck in the house. There are other days when I just don't want to leave the house, and that's fine too. And I don't have to do those things in order to journal for my mental health. So that for me is incredibly important. Going on to commonplacing now. I'm going to carry on with the numbers. So number six, but now we're talking about commonplacing, is that commonplacing centers my busy brain and it helps me to process what I'm interested in. So my brain is often going at what feels like 1,000 miles an hour, and I'm not always focusing in on certain interests of mine because they're not always top of my priority list, to be honest. I'm a mum and I work and all of those things, and I just don't always have the brain capacity to process what I'm interested in, other than like a glancing kind of, oh, that's interesting, great. And this makes me think of the Joan Didion quote, which is, quote, I write entirely to find out what I'm thinking, what I'm looking at, what I see, and what it means, what I want and what I fear, end quote. I love that quote. I think that expresses exactly why I journal, why I commonplace, why I write everything. It's to understand myself, to process myself. Um, so yes, it's commonplacing is excellent for helping you to process things, information, and your interests. What are we on? Number seven. It has helped me to build a knowledge of what I think in a more succinct way. So because I don't have endless space in my commonplace book to write, everything, it has helped me to be much more succinct in the what I write in it, basically. So I only write the most important or interesting things. And even though I have, an entire book, you can actually see on the screen, the Virginia Woolf, A Room of One's Own. I have so many tabs. I will not be putting all of those into my commonplace. I will be choosing which things to put in there when I do it. So yes, it helps me to be much more concise, in building a knowledge of my interests, building knowledge around my interests, I guess. And almost in opposition to that, or it's going to sound like that, is that it encourages me to more deeply interact with my interests, because now I have somewhere to store the information that's outside of my brain. I don't have to keep it in my brain anymore. Um, I don't need to have that excess brain capacity to be interested in a subject and then think, oh, I want to look more into that. And so quite often what will happen is I will, for example, I will look into one thing, which will then just mention something else. So, for example, I can't remember what I was looking. I think I was looking into. Oh, that was it. It was the suffragettes, and I was looking into a one of a particular suffragette, which then mentioned um, a woman. I'm actually looking through the commonplace now, so I can actually get this right. So her name is Constance Markovich, and she was a countess, but she was also the first elected MP. Let me get this correct. She was, because she had such an interesting life, this lady. She was elected, I think, the first MP in, I wrote a lot about her, in the UK, but she said no. She didn't want to be, um because she was Irish, she supported um the Irish parties, not British parties. So, and she was in prison. There was lots going on. So basically, she was part of Easter Rising. She had uh, lots of links to Easter Rising, and she was actually sentenced to death, which was then she had her sentence commuted, I believe. So then I realised that I don't know. I've often heard about Easter Rising, but I've not sort of looked into it. I don't know fully what it was over, and more about it basically. So then that got me onto Easter Rising, which then got me onto some IRA information, which it was just, it's those kind of things where it allows me to learn in the way that my brain works. So it allows me and encourages me to really deeply interact with my interests, because not only am I looking into my interests, I also learn about the historical events going on around that, and it helps me. I have a really rough time placing placing events in history and understanding it. So I know that, oh, this happened around the time of this, for example, but I find it really hard to place that in my head in a way that helps me understand the overall impact. So when I write those things down, it really helps me to place certain events and what the history that was going on around those events, what impact that had on said event or person or whatever it is that I'm learning about. And I love that. It's just given me a new way to learn and interact with what I'm learning. Segueing on beautifully from that is that number 9, I guess, that commonplacing has made me a more curious person. So, an example of this is that we were driving through North London a few weeks ago, and I saw a pub called the Charlotte Despard, and something in me just, I don't know, it made me think of suffragettes, and then I was like, well, it's probably not. And I just assumed it's because I've got suffragettes on the brain at the minute because been reading a lot about them. And so I looked it up on my phone, and she is a very famous but somewhat forgotten suffragette. And, this is, like I've said a bajillion times, one of my current special interests. So it felt very serendipitous, but also made me realize, like, before I was commonplacing, I just wouldn't have bothered looking it up. Probably I would have just thought, oh, that's cool, that's interesting, I wonder if it's that, and just moved on. But again, going back to the I have somewhere to put this information now, I actually looked it up. I saved the information, then I looked it up a bit more when I got home, and then I commonplaced about it, which then sent me off down a really long rabbit hole. Um, but yes, so this is the it allows me to be my curious self, I guess, in a way that I didn't have beforehand. Now, I know that you're probably all sitting there thinking, what do any of these commonplacing things that you've said have to do with mental health? For me, life goes by so quickly, and I often feel like it's happening to me rather than that I'm living or experiencing it. And commonplacing, all of these things that I've talked about with commonplacing, encourage me to stay in the moment and to be curious and to continue to learn. And all of those things are exceptionally good for your mental health. In terms of learning being good for your mental health specifically, we're learning more and more about this every day, but I'll just give you a few different quotes or mentions from a couple of places. So, the Better Health channel says that staying physically and mentally active are protective factors in reducing the risk of dementia. Johns Hopkins says that dementia prevalence fell from 2000 to 2012 in people aged 65 and over, and this drop was associated with staying in school longer. Now, obviously, do not take this as, fact, done, finished. There is still a lot more research that needs to go into this, but NHS UK does state that research shows that learning new skills can improve your mental well-being by boosting your self-confidence and self-esteem. So this is something that, like I said, we are still, as a human race, still looking into this. It's still very, very new, and it's something that many studies are looking into. But all of the studies that I'm looking at are saying, we're seeing this. It's just that there aren't enough studies to prove or disprove it. So in all of our studies, this is the outcome, is that learning is better for mental health, and in preventing things like dementia and Alzheimer's. But because there isn't a huge amount of science to back it up yet, I guess, then everybody's a little bit cautious in what they're saying, and that's fair. But I just, research has shown specifically that learning is good for your mental health. And protecting or improving our mental health is something that I think should be on everybody's to-do list, top of the list. Do things that are good for me and my mental health, because mental health is just health. And so, with all that being said, I would like to let you in on something that I've been working on for quite a while now, which is a journaling for mental well-being workshop that I am hosting in person in Bedford on the 22nd of February this year. So, not long now. I'll put the flyer up on the screen now, um, and the link will be in the description. So, I will be giving a presentation on journaling's positive effects on mental health, and that will be much more in depth than this video went into. And then there'll be a journaling session with everything provided. So you get a little journal, and I'll have washi, stickers, ephemera, printed bits and pieces, everything you could possibly need, and obviously some refreshments as well. And it will be in a calm space where you can meet like-minded people and learn and share techniques and just have a moment of self-care. And I have been wanting to do this for a really long time, so I'm really, really grateful for the support I've already received. But yes, if you're interested, I will pop the link down in the description box below. And I hope you'll have a fantastic week, and I will see you all again next week. Take care. Bye.